Hi everybody, my name's Vic. Hello. Yeah, thank you all for joining today's webinar on selling into the US. We're joined by three of our great partners. Got Angela at Taxjar, Jennifer at Taxjar, Angela at Shapiro, and Scott at Catching Clouds. They're all fantastic. And Angela, if you kickstart straight away, if you'd like to join the stage, and we can get going. If anybody has any questions, by the way, there is a question box that you can fill in. The order of the day is presentations will last about 20 minutes, and then we'll have roughly about 10 minutes worth of Q&A, and then we'll take it from there. Sorry, we'll go with Angela first. So hi, Angela.
Hi, everyone.
So everyone, this is Angela. I'm going to pass you over. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Angela Chakowski. I have with me here Marley Cooper, and we're going to share the stage today to talk to you all a bit about importing into the US from the side of a freight forwarder and customs broker. Go ahead and share the presentation. Perfect. So, as we've said, the goal of the presentation is to talk about how to import. Here's a quick snapshot about our company and why we know what we're talking about. With 103 years experience here at Shapiro and many years in the e-commerce realm, we have amassed a skill set and created a division just to support the e-commerce community because we understand the unique challenges that e-commerce shippers are experiencing. Today, we want to cover how to import freight into the US, including a deep dive on customs bond, Incoterms, and the customs entry process, which we find can be oftentimes the greatest challenge for new entrants into the US market. And of course, a bit about delivery, which right now, for those of us here in the US, is presenting its own special set of challenges. When folks start launching into the US market and want to begin selling here in the United States, moving the freight into the US is, of course, the first step. And I think that where people often forget a couple things is with mode and provider selection. So let's talk a bit about mode. When we have freight shipping into the United States, of course, you have your options of air and ocean. And so frequently we're asked for a comparison. I think people are surprised at the cost of air freight into the United States and that it's not oftentimes cheaper to ship air, even if you have a small shipment. So when you consider mode, make sure to consider the type of carrier that you're using. So the type of provider. We are a freight forwarder, and we generally handle shipments larger than, let's say, 200 kilos, larger than a pallet. So when we see people coming in asking for shipments smaller than that, we advise folks, and I would strongly encourage you to consider looking to a courier service. So there are many types of providers. Again, Shapiro is a freight forwarder. Courier service can often offer savings to you in the freight regard. So if you are going to ship air freight, courier tends to be, for smaller sized parcels, the way to go. And when we're talking about mode and provider, we also have the question of LCL versus FCL. So if you have met the threshold to go with a freight forwarder, be sure to consider LCL, or less than container load, or FCL, a full container load of cargo. So if you have more than, I say the tipping point to generally start evaluating is around 10 CBMs. At 10 CBMs, it becomes the question of, do you want that solo container to yourself and not to be beholden to any other requirements of the freight, or do you want an independent shipment, or do you want a consolidated shipment and to take advantage of some of the savings that come with consolidating your cargo with others? So at that, I'd say roughly 10 to 12 CBM mark is where we start evaluating the cost benefit of each. With LCL, your cargo, so your portion of the freight is consolidated with others, but you run into a couple of things there. So key points to consider with LCL. First off, your cargo will be placed in a container with other people's cargo, which is totally fine. It's segregated and it has its own markings and labelings, but it also could be subject to, if that container is held for any reason based on other cargo in the container, your cargo can be in that container. Now, we don't frequently see containers held for cause, but if that happens, your cargo's in there. And so that's just something to consider, that you don't have that container to yourself necessarily, but you're also only paying for a portion of the container. So if you're only using a portion, you only pay for the portion that you've used. You also have handling of your cargo beyond what would be handled at your own fulfillment center. So if you were moving a full container, you would move that entire container straight through to your FC, where it would be unloaded and processed. With consolidated cargo, your cargo is handled. So it's taken to a deconsolidation facility and broken out and then handled to a trucker separately. You also lose a little bit of time with that. It's not much. I'd say it's probably 3 to 5 days that you're losing. It can be much less, but it kind of depends on how the ports and the warehouses are running. So if that 3 days is important to you, or if you're in a time crunch, you may want to ask how your freight forwarder can help you expedite that process so that you don't run into a time delay at time of deconsol. And also the deconsolidation point is something to consider. So understanding if that container is coming into a main hub and then being deconsolidated, or if that consolidated container is going straight through the next facility and then being deconsolidated and going direct for delivery. So understanding the route that cargo is going to take can help you have a better picture of what that shipment will look like for you. So once we understand how we're going to move the cargo, we also like to talk about the PGA requirements of your freight, the customs and PGA requirements. So a license and a permit is not required to import through Customs and Border Protection here in the United States, but some of the PGAs, or partner government agencies, they were formerly called OGAs, for anybody who's been around a while. These PGAs may require some additional registrations or licenses. So it's so important that you understand your responsibilities, not only through US Customs, but also through these PGAs. So when we're talking about customs, knowing your classification, it is the responsibility of the importer of record to properly classify your goods. Now, I would implore you to solicit the help of a licensed customs house broker, to find a broker who can help you classify your goods, because it is ultimately the responsibility of that importer of record. And Marley will talk to us here in a few minutes about bonds. It is your responsibility to ensure that you know what your classifications are and the requirements for those classifications. A licensed customs house broker can help guide you through that process. Now, when it comes to PGAs, understanding what PGAs would be applicable is hugely important. I think people are often surprised at how certain devices are considered FDA regulated devices. Sunglasses, I think, is one that we see a lot of surprise and shock on. Anything that can be a medical device must be registered with the FDA. So we've seen folks get cargo here and it's not registered and have to ship it back. So be mindful of the PGA implications of any product that you're bringing in. So that's why bringing on a licensed customs house broker early on in the process to help guide you through will help you avoid costly pitfalls later. And I think the last thing, maybe the basics of importing into the US for this segment is understanding the record keeping responsibilities and the responsibilities of the importer. So you as the importer of record are required to keep records of your shipments for 5 years. And what that means is that if Customs and Border Protection reaches out and requests documentation on an entry for up to 5 years, you must be able to provide all entry documents on that shipment at any time. So I think it's so important to understand that when you're working with a customs house broker in the United States, they will help you gather your entry documents and your entry packets. And we as a customs house broker, as an example, are also required. We're bound by that same responsibility to keep those documents. But it's also an expectation that the importer of record keep a matching set of documents, because customs could come back and expect that we provide them with that information. Marley?
Bear with me, guys. I have to cover a little bit of the boring stuff. But I first want to talk about U.S. Customs bonds. This is very important to know prior to importing into the United States, as Angela had mentioned. A U.S. Customs bond is required for the entry of all import goods in the U.S., usually the kind of cargo that we see here at Shapiro, talking about the higher value cargo and the larger volume. So bonds ensure that all duties, taxes, and fees are paid to U.S. Customs. So basically, if the importer defaults on the payment of these fees, surety that holds that bond is responsible to pay those fees on their behalf. However, we never want to get to this point. We do our best to make sure that it does not. We do see that this will kind of make a black mark on your importing record if a surety does have to pay your bonds, your customs duties and fees, and it will make it very difficult to obtain a bond in the future. To note, there are two types of bonds. There's a single bond and a continuous bond. A single bond I like to call an a la carte bond. It's used one time per shipment. You cannot never reuse a single bond. So for ocean, be mindful you have to obtain not only a bond for your entry, but also for your import security filing. Import security filing is kind of a mini entry that is required here in the US. Customs needs to see prior to the vessel sailing what is going to be in your shipments. A few elements that we require to send to customs. So small things like your parties, your buyer, your shipper, your manufacturer. Only the first 6 digits of your HTS code will need to be included. That transmission requires a bond as well. So for ocean, you would need an ISF, a single ISF bond and a bond for your entry. For air shipments, there is no ISF required. It's only for ocean, so you would only need an entry bond for those types of shipments. Now, a continuous bond will cover both the ISF and entry portions of your shipment. This must cover 10% of the duties, taxes, and fees that will be paid in a 12-month period. So as a reference, a standard bond that we here at Shapiro usually sell is valued at $50,000. Higher value bonds may be purchased if necessary. So for instance, if you have a PGA such as FDA, USDA, which Angela had touched on, the value of your shipment increases and therefore the value of your bond will also need to increase.
We seem to have lost Angela midway through. I'll see if we can get her back. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, looks like I've got a few problems with Angela's side. So we'll just give her another couple of seconds and then if not, we'll move on to Jennifer and then we can finish the presentation for Shapiro towards the end. Just give her another, there we go, I'll invite her back. So yeah, won't be too much longer. There we go.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the next thing we want to discuss are Incoterms. I won't go into too much detail because you will all fall asleep, but I do want to note that they are very important to understand prior to the shipment process and before the shipment actually is set up for importation. It's extremely important to understand the agreement between yourself as the buyer and your shipper. So when you're shipping, for example, a CIF, you're not in control of the actual ocean or air transportation of your cargo. You'll take control only upon arrival here in the US, and you will be responsible for not only the customs clearance, but also the delivery. For another example would be for FOB terms, you would be responsible for the air or ocean transportation. So it's very important in knowing what you will be responsible for prior to your agreement with your shipper or seller. I also want to touch on a few more elements that are required for customs entry. Customs entry is needed to legally release your goods into U.S. commerce. It's preferred that a customs house broker does assist you with this, although as an importer of record, you could do this on your own. It's very difficult, and we really do highly suggest you get a broker involved here. If you are acting as the importer of record, you will ultimately be responsible for the accurateness of your entry documentation as presented to CBP. So here at Shapiro, our goal is to review your documentation prior to transmitting all info to CBP, and we are here to help handhold you through that process. I'll talk a little bit about when we do file entry. The goal here for us at Shapiro and for most brokers is to file entry as soon as we possibly can so that the cargo is fully released upon arrival here. For ocean, we'll transmit up to 5 days prior to the ETA, and for air, we'll transmit as soon as we know that the cargo is what we call wheels up. So we know that it's been manifested and it is set to depart on a plane. In order for goods to be cleared, a broker or the importer of record will need to have a complete commercial invoice and packing list. There are very specific elements needed on each of these documents. Some to name are terms of sale, accurate commodity description, showing the seller and the buyer, net weight, piece counts, and there are many more, but those are just a few to touch on here. So another thing that to keep in mind, as Angela had mentioned, is the classification. This is one of the more difficult pieces of the entry process. And we want to ensure that you or your broker are classifying your product accurately, as this does not only identify the type of product you are bringing into the U.S. commerce, but also it's identifying the duty rate that you will be paying to U.S. Customs. As we are handling your customs entry, we'll also be assisting to clear any PGAs as needed. So we did touch on this already, but as we are handling your customs entry, we are also clearing FDA, USDA, Fish and Wildlife. That all is going to be transmitted at the same time. So here at Shapiro, we are able to not only handle your customs entry, but also all those PGAs at the same time as entry.
Really quickly, I see we have a question, so I'm just going to, if I can, read that out. So I see the question is about shippers or Chinese companies offering DDP services, and they're acting for the company as the importer of record. The seller does not act as the importer of record. The customs documents are not available. Is it okay to work this way? So the responsibility is on the importer of record. So whoever is taking on that role is responsible for the bond, and securing the bond, paying for the bond, is responsible for record keeping. So it's whoever is being declared as the importer of record to U.S. Customs. So if another party is taking that on your behalf, then they would be the party responsible for those record keeping requirements. So I hope that helped.
Actually, along the same lines, as a foreign importer, I do want to mention something that's important to keep in mind. So if you're a foreign importer, meaning a non-U.S. company, and you are looking to import goods here in the U.S., you'll need to designate a U.S. company to act as what we call an ultimate consignee, meaning the party here in the U.S. that is ultimately responsible for the cargo. So this party needs to be located in the U.S. and has to willingly act as the ultimate consignee. Sometimes we find that there are fulfillment centers here in the U.S. Or other warehouses that do not want any responsibility when it comes to the customs entry, so or the release of goods. So please be careful when you're talking to your U.S. parties here to make sure that they are willing to act as that party. We here in the U.S., when we are transmitting our entry, we do need to include their IRS number, their full name, and address. So it's also something to keep in mind.
So we wanted to share with you just two quick stories of, we're going to call them pitfalls, that we've seen people fall into when beginning to ship into the United States. And it's two of the main topics that Marley talked about. The first is anti-dumping and countervailing duty. So anti-dumping duty in the United States can be pretty substantial. So understanding when a product is subject to anti-dumping duty will help maybe avoid some unpleasant surprises. We've had a client or two in the past who've shipped a product that would have been subject to anti-dumping duty and didn't know it at the time. And when the cargo arrived here, they were subject to 300% duty. So that it can be, again, very substantial, and it's a really unpleasant surprise that your product is here and you're anticipating, entry into a fulfillment center to begin, stocking inventory and selling. So understanding if anti-dumping duty is going to be necessary. We've seen folks import, get that unfortunate surprise, and then re-export to another market where a commodity won't be subject to anti-dumping duty. So big question to ask upfront when you understand that classification and commodity. And I think the other is when you're talking about suppliers taking on the responsibility of shipping, very likely under CIF and CFR terms, make sure to ask the question, and get it in writing if you can, if destination charges are going to be included and paid in that price. So someone can quote you cost of goods under CIF terms. And what that means is it does get the cost of the goods and the freight up to the CFS if we're shipping LCL, but it doesn't include destination charges. So when we talked about LCL and deconsolidation and the activities that take place at that warehouse, there are charges associated with that aren't necessarily included in CIF terms. So we see, and this happens probably more often than not, folks will get a bill for those destination charges that can include unloading and palletizing and forklift and all of these warehousing fees that aren't included in the cost of goods under CIF terms that can sometimes amount to more than the cost of ocean freight itself. So make sure that if you are shipping under a CIF term that you know if those destination charges are included. And if they're not, ask for the rates, ask for those fees that you'll be paying, because when you get that bill, that has to be paid before you can take possession of your cargo. So your product can be in the United States at a warehouse and available, but until destination charges are paid, you can't take possession. So if you negotiate the purchase of the goods under CIF terms, keep thinking about what's included in this, even if the terms of sale and the Incoterms dictate otherwise. I'm sorry that apparently the PowerPoint hasn't been showing most at all this entire time, but we do have, when this gets sent out, we will send a link to the Incoterms cheat sheet that we have here at Shapiro, which is a really great quick guide for this is what's included in these terms generally speaking, and these are the things that you should consider asking about when you're negotiating with a supplier overseas. I do see we have another question, getting a children's product certificate for toy imports into the U.S.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to go through the questions with you. I can also just say that we can send out the presentations to everyone.
Great.
So if, we'll get this out to everyone.
Wonderful. All right, so I see two questions if we want to take those, because I think they are applicable for this segment. Getting children's product certificate for toy imports in the USA if you can't get one from the supplier.
So if you go to Consumer Product Safety's website, they have a really good explanation of what is required upon arrival into the US for toys, and they do have links for those certificates, and you can work directly with them. They are very helpful. They have contact information on their website to discuss what is required on those certificates. If you cannot get it from the supplier, you should be able to do your own private testing if needed, and then you can work on getting that form together yourself. But it is very important to know before importing toys that CPSC is regulating those, and it will need proper documentation.
Great. And one final question that I see here, talking about suppliers offering a door-to-door price with shipping and duties included, but not offering any documents with this. No destination charges, but not having any import documents. How could this affect the importing process? If someone is offering a door-to-door solution with duties and shipping and all the services included, they would be the ones taking on the responsibility as that importer of record to maintain those documents, maintain those duties, to pay all of those charges. So if someone offers a DDP, so delivered duty paid, destination duty paid, all the way through to the door, everything should be included in your purchase price. And that's why when Marley highlighted about the commercial invoice, they should indicate on there that is a DDP shipment. Everything should be included up to and through the door, getting it to the door, et cetera. So talking about getting items to the door, I want to talk briefly about delivery, which is certainly not an afterthought. It's essentially that last mile to get your product into a fulfillment center. Right now, the trucking market in the United States is very challenged. We've implemented, there was new regulation that came out in December that has kind of rocked U.S. trucking. Drivers are now required to keep electronic logs of their delivery hours. So what this means for anyone delivering cargo in the United States, and whether that's international foreign cargo moving intermodally, if it's LTL cargo, if it's domestic cargo moving throughout the U.S., it is more expensive right now to move domestic cargo than it has been in quite some time. Driver hours are being limited because of this new regulation, in a way, because of the record keeping requirements on U.S. drivers. So there's a lot of information. A lot of it is available on many websites and publications. If you check out Shapiro.com, we have quite a few recent releases on this. So that last mile trucking, understanding what the requirements are to get your product from a fulfillment center, from a port, from a rail into your distribution hub is essential. The cost to do so, as we said, right now is increasing, and we're seeing it across the board for every mode, whether it's truckload or full container or LTL. We are seeing rates increase. It's not substantial yet, but because of driver waiting times, we do see that. So when we talk about delivery, understanding the expectations for your fulfillment center. So if you're working with a third-party fulfillment center, whether it's Amazon and the Amazon FBA program or an outside third party, knowing what they will require to accept your goods in will help expedite bringing your inventory to market. Different FCs have different labeling requirements, different palletizing requirements, and that could be dimensions of pallets, directional pallets, so two-way or four-way pallets, and then, of course, how you have to label and stack the goods and overhang. So knowing what the sort of routing expectation is for your fulfillment center will help expedite that process. Lastly, I think understanding what their appointment structure is like. So if they have limited appointments and a lot of deliveries coming in, it's more challenging for you to get your inventory into their into their facility. So knowing what they need from you or from the forwarder coordinating on your behalf will help us to kind of get the trucker in there, get them unloaded, and get your product in, and hopefully to avoid rejected shipments. So I think that's maybe the basics. It's hopefully a 20 or so minute rundown on how to begin shipping into the United States, but there's of course so much more. Marley and I are both here and happy to help guide you in any way we can. We have an entire e-commerce team that's available to support and answer questions if you have any. We're happy to take more questions now in the live session if you like, and otherwise for us.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any questions, please do post them in the chat or the question box. We'll get them answered by Angela and Marley. Thank you for your talk and presentations, guys. That was really interesting. What I think we'll do next is if Jennifer is ready, I'm inviting Jennifer to start our presentation too. Again, another one of our great partners, TaxJar. Please keep the questions coming if you have them. They're here today to be able to kind of talk through some of the issues that you guys might have. And yeah, here's Jennifer. Jennifer, hi.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me and see me? All right.
Yeah, we got you. We got you.
Let me share my screen. All right, I see it there. Let me make it bigger. All right, come on now. All right, well, I see my PowerPoint. I hope that means everyone else does. Maybe let me know in the chat if you don't. So hi, my name is Jennifer Dunn, and I'm with TaxJar. So we help sellers from all over the United States and the world deal with their sales tax. Now, I'm going to talk about the basics of sales tax in the US, and this does apply to sellers who live in the US and international sellers if they meet some requirements in the United States. Thanks, Laura, I appreciate it. So just very quickly, this is me. I'm Jennifer Dunn. I'm the Chief of Content at TaxJar. That means I write about sales tax, US sales tax for international sellers coming into the US all the time. And I'm here to help you make informed decisions. So this is who I talk with every day, people who make a living selling online. And it might be people who partly sell brick and mortar, partly sell online. It's people who want to be educated. You want to do the right thing. I know you all want to do the right thing when it comes to tax in a new country where you might be selling. However, that can be tough. In the US, you need to determine something called sales tax nexus, which I'll talk about in a minute. And you might have other tax obligations. And also most sellers I talk with, they're just trying to save time and money on this time-consuming chore that's just, it's not profitable. It's not helpful to your business. You just want to get it done and get back to work, which I totally understand. This is what most people say. I want this to go away. But first, let's talk about what is sales tax in the United States, and does this apply to me as an international seller? From some of you guys watching this may apply to you. Some of you guys, it may not apply to you. And so you're doing the right thing. You're getting educated to find out the first steps to US sales tax to see if you need to continue to pursue this and learn more about it. And one thing I do want to say, this is a shortened version of my presentation. Normally, this usually goes about 30 to 40 minutes. So if there's some things that I really kind of gloss over very quickly or you don't understand, I'm happy to share some resources with more information for you guys. So first of all, sales tax basics. What is sales tax? And if you'll excuse me. So sales tax, this is basically what it is. It's a small percentage of a retail sale. So in other words, you would charge your buyer $20 US for the product. Well, you would have to add a small percentage on that for the sales tax. The sales tax goes back to a US state and it pays for budget items like schools and roads and public safety. So, a police car or an ambulance would be paid for by sales tax very often. Unfortunately, chaos prevails in the United States when it comes to sales tax. And there's one major reason for that. It's because the United States is a union of states, and each state gets to make their own sales tax rules and laws. So that means in the US, you're dealing with 46 different sets of laws, and they can be very different. Who's on the hook for sales tax can vary. What products are taxable can vary. So for example, say you sell clothing. Well, in some states, you don't have to charge sales tax on clothing. It's totally non-taxable, though in most states, clothing is taxable. Sales tax rates, those can vary. You may have a very low sales tax rate in one state. Say you only have to charge 5% sales tax to your buyer. In another state, you may have to charge 9.5% sales tax. So it's very different. And then the due dates, when you actually have to file and pay sales tax, that can vary a lot too. So unfortunately, it's just a little bit complicated in the US. They don't make it easy. It's because of all those different states. All right, I mentioned this before. Nexus. This is the key word right now in the United States when it comes to who has to deal with sales tax. So let's talk about Nexus. This is what it is. It's no more, no less than a presence or connection in a state that's significant enough for you to be required to comply with that state's sales tax law. So you can see some examples here of Nexus, but let's go through a few examples. Now, most of you probably not based in the US, but if you did have a home office in a state in the US or a location like a retail store or a warehouse or anything like that that your business owns, then you would have Nexus in the state where that store is located. An employee in the United States, so say you hire a salesperson or you hire someone in customer service in the United States, that creates Nexus in that state. And a salesperson, like I just said. And then also if you attend trade shows, sometimes if you attend and are selling your products at trade shows in the United States, once again, depending on the state, that could create Nexus for you. Inventory in a warehouse. Now here's the big one for Amazon FBA. A lot of people are selling on Amazon FBA. Amazon, we work closely with them and they are actively sending us. I had 3 Amazon emails this morning from people who want to get into FBA in the United States and they have questions about selling on Amazon and why, when Amazon moves their inventory to different states in the Amazon warehouse, they have Nexus in those states. So I will talk about that just a little bit. All right, so see, these are states right now where Amazon has warehouses. So if you decide to start selling on Amazon US and you're sending your inventory to Amazon, you may send it to the state of Kentucky, which is kind of over there toward the east of the United States. And then they may send it all around the rest of the country. They may send it to California, to Texas, to Georgia, to Florida. And that would mean that you would have this sales tax nexus in all of those states. And when you have sales tax nexus, that means you're required to register for a sales tax permit with that state, collect sales tax whenever you make a sale to a buyer in that state, and then file and pay sales tax when your due date rolls around. So already, I know it sounded a little bit complicated. So here's just a little more about inventory nexus. Most states say you owning inventory that's sitting in their state creates sales tax nexus. It means that you have to collect sales tax from buyers in that state. Now, I kind of talked about this when I talked about clothing, but some things are taxable and some are not. So for example, tangible items like a lamp or a coffee mug, they're usually always going to be taxable in every US state. There are some things that are not taxable though, such as clothing. It's sometimes taxable, sometimes not. So I've got the little X and check mark right there. Grocery items, same thing. So if you sell grocery, maybe you're importing food into the United States. Well, some states groceries are taxable, some states they're not. In some states groceries are taxable, but just at a totally different rate than every other object in that state. Shipping. So if you charge your customers for shipping, say you charge them, $20 US to ship it to their location, well, sometimes you have to charge sales tax on that shipping charge. Groceries. Like I said, most of the time not taxable. So example, this bagel in New York, it's not cut, so it's a grocery item. It is not taxable. No sales tax needs to be charged. However, the minute you slice this bagel in half and then sell it to somebody, all of a sudden it's prepared food ready to eat and it becomes taxable. So as you can see, sales tax is just, there's some crazy laws. Now, the good thing about sales tax is, say you do find yourself, hey, I'm on the hook, I need to collect sales tax from some of my buyers in the US. Well, it's a pass-through tax. So you collect it, but then you remit what you collect to the state. You should not be paying this out of pocket. If you are, then you're doing it wrong, and you're losing money out of your pocket. If you should have collected 6% in sales tax and instead you're paying it out of pocket, well, you're losing 6% of every sale. So just think of yourself as a collection agent. You're a collection agent and you are helping that state get sales tax from their state citizens. This really is the main message I want to say here. I know I will explain some kind of interesting and weird and confusing concepts, but getting started, just learning it, is the hardest part. Once you get started and have filed a few sales tax returns, it can be automated and it becomes just another chore in your business. Not a fun chore, not a profitable chore, but one that you can definitely handle. All right, so this is the $1 million question. I'm a non-US seller. I am going to be maybe selling into the US through Amazon FBA, or maybe I'm doing my own thing. So when should I collect sales tax? The golden rule is collect sales tax when the item sold is shipped to a state where you have nexus. So I usually do a pretty long example here because this is kind of complicated, but I'll just give a short example. Say that you hire an employee in the state of Texas to help you with your business. Well, you would have nexus in Texas. And in that case, you would need to register for a Texas sales tax permit and collect sales tax from all of your buyers when you ship an item to the state of Texas. But say you also have a lot of buyers in California. Well, if your business does not have nexus in California, then there is no need for you to collect sales tax from buyers in California. And that's sort of the simple explanation of nexus. If you do have nexus in a state, you need to register with that state's tax authority. It's usually called the Department of Revenue. It might have a different name. And also, if you sell taxable products in that state, that's when you need to register. So for example, say you sell groceries, but groceries are not taxable in the state where you are selling, then you probably don't need to register for a sales tax permit. Every once in a while, your mileage may vary. Remember, with 46 different sets of laws, there's always going to be some little nitpicky thing that's different from state to state. That's why it's a good idea to really get educated about the states where you have nexus. All right, so selling on Amazon with sales tax. This is I'm sure a few of you are selling on Amazon or maybe considering it. The good news is that Amazon will collect sales tax on your behalf. So you can set that up in Seller Central, you're all good. Of course, they're going to charge you a fee, but Amazon, they charge you a fee for everything. That's sort of the cost of doing business. Hopefully, you'll have more benefits from Amazon than costs. You should always choose your product tax codes. Not going to get too much into this, but this is just a way to make sure that Amazon knows, hey, clothing is taxable in Georgia, so I should charge sales tax on clothing there, but clothing is not taxable in Pennsylvania, so I should not charge sales tax on clothing to buyers in Pennsylvania. The bad news, though, for Amazon is you do have to enable sales tax collection in Seller Central. Amazon will not just automatically know, hey, I need to collect sales tax on your behalf. Amazon will also not tell sellers how to collect sales tax in states. They won't tell you where to collect. They won't give you any guidance. When you sign a contract with Amazon, there's something on page 17 of your contract, if you've read down that far, that says, hey, you're on your own for sales tax. You need to consult your sales tax advisor. So that makes it easy to collect wrong in Amazon. And so we do have some sources to help you with that. If you go to FBAsalestax.com, we have a free ebook that includes the collection settings for every state for Amazon. And we are happy to provide that. All right, so let's say you realize you have Nexus, you registered for a sales tax permit, you set up Amazon or any other shopping cart and marketplace you use like Shopify or Walmart to collect sales tax. Pretty soon, your sales tax filing deadline is going to roll around. That means it's going to be time for you to gather up all your sales tax data and file a sales tax return. First of all, It would be nice if maybe just once a year you got to file a sales tax return, but that's normally not the way it works, unfortunately. As you can see, there are several filing frequencies that you might be asked to file. Some states might say, hey, I want you to file every month. And some states say, hey, I only want you to file once a year. Some might want you to file quarterly. And that just mostly depends on your sales volume. This guy over here with the big money bags, he is probably going to need to file monthly because he's making a whole lot of money. Remember, that state is using that money to pay for their budget. So they're going to want him to turn that money over right quick. On the other hand, we have the guy over on the left. He's a pretty small volume seller. Maybe he's seasonal or just getting started. He may only have to file once per year sales tax. And most sellers file quarterly or monthly, it seems like. So yeah, often quarterly, and that's kind of a middle ground. The deadlines also change. Remember, 46 states, 46 different sets of guidelines. Those are the main sales tax filing due dates on that calendar. But once again, it could be different. And also, see, here's a typical filing scenario for a filer who has sales tax nexus in 3 states. And remember, this is for any seller with nexus. You could live in the UK or you could live in the United States. If you have nexus in these states, this could be your filing, your typical filing scenario. So once a month in one state, once a quarter in another state, and annually in a third state. As you can see, it's kind of hard to build up a routine filing sales tax when all these states have such different due dates. And also, you definitely want to pay on time when it comes to filing sales tax. Some states give you a discount. It's like 1 or 2%. They let you keep a little bit of what you collected, but hey, it's free money. Might as well get that discount. And also, you'll be asked to pay more if you file late. So you always want to file your sales tax on time. And that's even if you didn't charge or you didn't collect a penny of sales tax, you still need to file a sales tax return by your due date. So let me quickly go over the steps to filing a sales tax return. You need to gather all your data, all the sales tax you've collected off every channel. So say you have a Shopify store for your brand and you sell on Amazon FBA, well, you need to gather up all the sales tax you collected on both of those channels. The state will tell you what format they want you to compile it into and then file. So the problem is there are certain states, and this is most US states, where it's a huge pain to file sales tax because you were supposed to collect sales tax, and Amazon will do this for you, at the sales tax rate of your buyer's location. And that rate can vary wildly, even within a state. It can be anywhere from 2.9% up to 8 or 9%. So then you have to tell the state, hey, I collected $8 in this city, and I collected $9 in this county, and you have to divide it up. And so it's even harder if you're multi-channel, if you're trying to go through and figure out how much sales tax you collected from each little city, county, special district in each state. Some states have almost 1,000 districts. So this can just get really crazy. So you see, here's a California Schedule B. As you can see, look at all these different districts. And so this poor person has had to figure out, okay, I should have paid $3 to Riverside and $2 to Sacramento, $1 to San Bernardino. But that's where TaxStar comes in. So TaxStar, that's what we do, is we help you with your sales tax. So we will give you a report like this. It'll tell you, hey, this is what you put in each location on your sales tax filing, and you're good to go. So that's where TaxStar really comes in and helps you automate this. All right, so what do you do to get started? Well, first of all, determine where you have Nexus and then register for a sales tax permit. And TaxStar can help you with that. Oh, whoops, I'm skipping one. But this is important to talk about this right here. When to register. So a lot of people will say, hey, I'm just getting started in the US. I don't even know if I'll make a single sale. I don't know, is it worth my time to register for a sales tax permit? And that's a great question. So we've asked a lot of sales tax experts about this, including Scott with Catching Clouds, who you're about to talk to. And the answer is you need to just figure out your appetite for risk. So if you say, you know what, I'm just getting started, it's going to cost me a lot of money to get sales tax compliant because I have to hire an accountant and I have to get a US bank account. Well, then you might want to wait. But on the other hand, if you're already, making $50,000 a month in the US or more, if your business is really growing, then you definitely want to get compliant. So it does sort of depend on your appetite for risk and your sales volume. And I do have more information about that should anybody want it. All right, so what do you do now? I will just quickly tell you about how TaxStar can help. I don't want to go over my time. So with TaxStar, you just connect your e-commerce provider, any of these. Our newest one is Squarespace, actually. I need to add them on there. We'll show you how much sales tax you collected in each of those states where you have Nexus and where you're collecting sales tax. With Amazon, we'll even show you where you might have Nexus. So say you're not sure where Amazon has sent all your inventory all over the United States. Well, we'll show you. We'll say, hey, we see that you have Nexus in these 5 states. We'll also break down your sales tax collection by jurisdiction. So that enables you to file your sales tax return manually. We have tools to help make sure you're collecting the right amount. So maybe you set up something wrong when you were collecting sales tax. Well, we can help you with that. And we will auto file your sales tax return in all the US states with a sales tax. So we'll automatically file your sales tax. A lot of times you do have to have a US bank account. It's sort of the only issue with auto file for international sellers. We have more than 10,000 happy customers, including Coca-Cola, which I believe is one of the most recognized brands in the world. I was just reading that the other day, which is great. All right, and to talk to us, just email us at support@taxstar.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them over here. Okay, yeah, we had one question already. Let me just answer that. I'm a UK seller with a UK limited company. What is the best option you recommend for us when started selling in the US? I am going to send you to a blog post instead of going over all of that because it's kind of a complicated answer. But basically, I recommend that you first get educated, figure out where you have Nexus, figure out how much money you're making in the US and if it's even time for you to register for a sales tax permit. And from there, either hire a sales tax accountant who will help you get registered in the US or try to do it yourself. And so in that blog post that I just shared in the chat, I have instructions to do both. So, you know, it just depends on the time that you have. Yeah, Levent, yeah, I'm happy to help you. It just kind of depends on your time and expertise. If you have sort of a money person in your company or if you'd rather just outsource it, it really just depends. So, all right, well, thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you for your presentation. That was awesome. I've got a couple of questions for you. Certainly one. I haven't made, if a client hasn't actually made any sales yet in the US and they're just kind of testing out the water, do they need to register in every state where they have a Nexus?
Now, I would say, now remember, I'm not an accountant. I work at a software. However, I talk to lots of accountants and we have over 10,000 customers that we've talked to extensively. So I would say probably not, unless you are just, you know, you're a big company and you know you're going to hit the gate running and you are going to start making a lot of money right away. If you're going to test the waters, what I would do is I would keep very close track of my sales in each state where I have Nexus. And as I start to, if I start to get over about $3,000 in sales in that state, that's when I would start looking into collecting sales tax. However, that number is different for every business. You may have very tiny profit margins. And so if you get caught and the state says, hey, you owe us 6% on every sale and you owe us back taxes and penalties and interest, then you may wipe out your entire profit margin. So you might want to collect sales tax immediately. So it just really depends. It's one of those things, it's a really it depends kind of question.
Right, okay, brilliant. Thank you. Final question, if I pay sales tax in the US, do I also have to pay income tax?
Oh my goodness, okay, so a lot of times, luckily, most countries have a tax treaty with the United States, meaning you don't have to pay income tax in the United States. Some states, US states may try to say, hey, you owe us state income tax. A lot of times, though, you do not have to deal with that. Just if you're getting started in the US and you're hiring an accountant to help you get started, I would just ask them that question. They will probably tell you no, but once again, if maybe you're a giant high volume seller, you might be a giant brand in Europe just moving into the US, and then yeah, you might be on the hook for state income tax, but it's very unusual. I'd say it's a rare case.
Okay, and Paul has actually kind of followed up with that by asking, is it $3,000 per month or per annum?
I would say per annum, Paul. If you're starting to get a $3,000 per year, then yeah, it's probably time to look into sales tax.
Brilliant. And that will kind of follow on really well to kind of the next speaker. And we'll be talking to Catching Clouds next. Jennifer, thank you very much. If there are any further questions for Jennifer, please let us know. And we can ask her very kindly to answer those for us.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's brilliant. Okay, cool, great. Thank you to Taxture. Just gonna, as Jennifer mentioned, bring in Catching Clouds and Scott, who'll be able to talk through more about the kind of tax side of the US. So I'm just going to invite him through now. Hi, Scott.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm just going to kind of pop out and let you. Thank you.
Sounds great. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Scharf with Catching Clouds. We are e-commerce accounting experts. I'm going to share my slides here and get started. I have a lot to cover. I've really enjoyed the earlier presentations. I have to thank Jennifer for covering the sales tax conversation, which I do on a regular basis. And actually, if you're not done with sales tax, I'm doing another webinar on sales tax management in about an hour. So you're welcome to go to our site to take a look at it. But let's talk about doing business and accounting in the US, okay? So you've decided you want to do business in the US and how you want to do it. There have been a bunch of questions about it. I'm going to talk about some of the details about the compliance and requirements and, you know, timing of things, and some of those things have already come up. So I'm going to change slides here and move through. So I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of registering as a business and the timing. I'm going to talk about knowing your numbers, kind of accounting basics. You're a business. If you're going to be reaching out and extending your business here, you want to make sure you're tracking your numbers and know if you're profitable or not. And then I'm going to talk about some of the tools that are important to kind of magnify what you're doing, and it is worth investing in those. And of course, we'll collect questions as we go. So the pros and cons. If you're on this webinar, you're already considering doing business here. I'm in Colorado. It's quite cold today, but we spend a lot of money. I have UPS or FedEx show up on a regular basis dropping off packages from Amazon or other online sites, and we do spend a fair amount of money online, and it's definitely a big opportunity. There's tons of online marketplaces, shopping carts you can set up to establish your brand, and then a range of fulfillment options from Amazon FBA, fulfilled by Amazon in their warehouses in 25 states, as well as 3PL, third-party logistics sites on the East Coast and the West Coast, depending on what your business is. But there's just a range of services that you need, like Shapiro and TaxJar, to help you extend your business into the US and do it profitably. But you need to keep an eye on it. You can run it remotely for the most part, except when it comes to a few things like possibly touring a 3PL. You kind of want to come here, and it's fun to come to the US on vacation. But if you're doing it for business, things like a 3PL you need to visit, and more than likely, and actually pretty much assuredly, you'll have to come to the US to sign paperwork to open up a US bank account here, whether you're working as an international entity or you create a US entity. You've got to decide if and when you are going to register as a US business entity or not. I'll cover that. You've got to pay attention to compliance, sales tax, which Jennifer did a great job giving you an overview of, which is a requirement of international sellers if you're storing your product here in the US. And then federal and potentially state income taxes. Now, those can be minimized due to the treaties, okay? So it's not quite the same as a US entity or a US business here. And then opening a US bank account is very challenging and constantly changing. So I did a webinar year or two ago, and I think everything I said in that webinar is no longer accurate, at least around opening up a US bank account. Well, let's keep moving forward. There's a lot to cover here. So should you operate as a foreign business or a US entity? And you can operate as a foreign individual as well. You don't have to have a foreign business entity to do that. And when you're starting, and I'll repeat what Jennifer said, if you're starting out as a foreign individual or a smaller entity and you're testing out the waters and figuring things out, you can start that way. and move forward. I'm going to talk about the details. So you definitely want to look at it. And like Jennifer said, if you're a larger brand and the US is your priority for this year and you're expanding in, then you absolutely want to dig into the details and figure out what's involved in the pros and cons of working as a foreign entity. So let me move forward. So if you're working as a foreign entity or individual, there's less overhead. Okay, you don't have to, there's just less overhead. You are basically establishing a small beachfront or beachhead here in the US to be able to push and do it. Your compliance are lower than opening up a US entity, which is a separate business entity, and I'll talk about those. Now, if you aren't storing products in the US, you've decided that you're shipping larger products or luxury goods, you're not sure, or in the first quarter, you're just going to take orders and have people understand it's going to take days or weeks to deliver your products, and you're going to drop ship them in, okay, from Europe, from Canada, from wherever, or you're using a drop ship company distributor in the US and you're never taking ownership of inventory, okay, then you got to be careful about the ones in the US. You don't necessarily have to open up and become a US entity. Now, it's harder to open up a US bank account. You will run into situations where you'll need a US bank account to do certain things, especially if you're, now you can pay contractors via PayPal. There's a number of things that you can do, but you're going to run into situations where, let's say, a third-party logistic provider or whatever will only take an ACH payment from a US bank account. It's going to be more driven by those impacts, but you don't necessarily have to open one up day one. And I'll talk more about Payoneer, World First, and other tools for allowing you to make payments and have virtual bank accounts that might work for you for quarters or longer, depending on what you need to do. But I will tell you, as soon as you need to do sales tax, there are multiple states that will not take a credit card, will not take a foreign ACH, will not take a foreign check, and that you'll collect sales tax and the state will make it almost impossible without a US bank account to pay them the sales tax you've collected and you're trying to give them, no matter how frustrating it is for you. So if you're opening up as a foreign entity or individual, you need to get an FEIN or SS4 form. You'll need a US mailing address, and there are a number of mailbox services. It's Global Mail, I think so. There's a number of them out there that allow you to get a US address. They'll scan the mail and email it back to you and or collect things. Now, this isn't necessarily a good service for these mailboxes for product returns. You want to be very careful to make sure you know what's going on with your product returns, and that's a whole other discussion. Like I said, to open up a bank account, you can use tools like Payoneer or World First, and really you should be doing this if you're working internationally. One, Payoneer and World First will charge you less than Amazon will to convert those funds to your own currency, and they will allow you to keep currency in that US dollars here if you have to pay contractors, so you don't convert funds from dollars back to, let's say, pounds or euros, and then to pay someone in the US, you have to convert it back and you pay all this extra currency conversion. So there's real benefits to keeping some of your currency in US dollars or from US companies in pounds or euros. So that is one of the big tips, is you want to sign up for one of those accounts to both get your money in a lower cost and manage those currency things. Now, a US federal return can be required. There's an 1120S that needs to be filed. So one of the things you'll need to do is partner with a CPA firm, which we're actually an accounting firm. We don't do federal and state income taxes, but we do advise international sellers and support them once they have a US entity. But you'll want to make sure you find that CPA partner. I can make some recommendations, so can Jennifer, on partners we know that are CPAs and accountants that understand both e-commerce businesses and Amazon businesses, as well as understanding the taxes for an international business. Now, if you decide to operate as a US entity, I would have to say that probably there's really two major reasons why that you would decide, well, two or three, okay? The first is it separates your product liability. If you have a product, baby products or something that can be chewed, or a supplement company or any business that you're concerned about the liability, and you have liability insurance in your own country, if you open up a US entity, you would end up having insurance in both companies, and the liability would be limited to that country. Okay, so that's probably the first reason. The next is maybe a significant or some tax savings by having a separate US company, okay? And the next is if you're thinking about potentially selling off that business. If you want to build it and have it being modularized, even if it's years in the future, that you want that business to have a history in the US and you could potentially sell it off as a specific division, then you'd want to have a US company. Now you can build, there's some trust. It's more of an international world these days. I don't really blink if I go to buy a product and it's international. Most of the products that people are buying are selling in the US. They've bought internationally from Europe or India or Asia. It's not as much. Now, if you do have a US entity and you do want your own people or yourself, you might think about living in the US for a while. If you have a US entity and it's your business, you have more visa options and it makes it easier to open up a bank. Now, as soon as you open up another entity, whether it's a UK limited company or a Canadian business or another business entity, you have all the costs related to that business. You have insurance for that business. You have to pay for the accounting and tools for that business and you will have income tax and you can manage that. Any other registrations and requirements of having that business. And that's overhead that you could potentially delay weeks, months, or quarters until you know that you've really established what's going on in the US. And then there's lots of states. Where do you register in the US? Should you be a Delaware corporation? Because everyone does that. Should you register in Wyoming? I'm not going to answer all those questions. That's an hour-long discussion just about that. I'm also not going to cover whether you should be a C Corp. You can't really be an S Corp if you're an international entity or business or a partnership. Typically, it's a C Corp, just to answer that question, and save you an hour of all the details related to that. So those are really the reasons. And if none of those reasons apply to you, you don't need to do the overhead. Now, sales tax still applies whether you're a US entity, a foreign individual, or a foreign seller if you're storing inventory here and then providing it. And then you can't collect sales tax until you have a license, okay? Even though Amazon and Shopify, and I'll jump into sales tax a little, make it really easy to click buttons and say collect sales tax, you can't legally until you've paid, you have a registration, and you have an actual, license badge from the state that says you can do it. So I've talked about opening up a US bank account, and there's a lot I want to get to. Expect to come to the US to sign the documents. Okay. It used to be you could go to branches there, and it's just not the case. Between all the different laws that have been put into place, it's just really difficult. You need to plan ahead, make sure everything's in order before you come here. And you can't just decide to fly to New York and figure you'll be on vacation for a few days and you'll just go to a couple different banks and be able to walk in with cash and your passport and business, whatever. No, you need to know that you're working with a bank that'll do it. The rules are constantly changing, but you need to have an IRS EIN, your business documents, a passport, and then a US business address. But I highly recommend you work with an advisor. You can reach out to me and I can make introductions if you're looking for those advisors. There's great resources on the blog that TaxJar shared, but you just want to prepare when you can do it. You can attempt to avoid it, and sales tax is one of the key components that will drive you to have a US bank account. All right. And if you open up a US entity, you have to have a separate US bank account for that US entity. Now, the next part is knowing your numbers. And this is kind of where we're passionate about e-commerce accounting and really helping e-commerce business owners really thrive and go. And you have to remember that even with all of the shipping and logistics and sales tax and listing your products and repricing and all the rules in Amazon and the marketing and the Google ads and all the other pieces, you might be super passionate about the marketing or the product. You're really passionate about your product. The piece is you're a business, okay? Whether you're an individual and you're, pushing some stuff in the US and you want to make some extra money for some vacations here, or you're looking to pay for your kids' college or whatever you're trying to accomplish, you need to know your numbers and be clear about your numbers there and really track. And I've heard some great advice throughout the sessions, especially from Shapiro, on really tracking those costs and being aware of what is it costing you to get your products to the US and what is it costing you for sales tax and compliance and tools. So these are really critical to know. So you want to know your numbers. The first one is your gross profit. So if you sell $10,000 in a month in the US, how much are all of those cost of goods sold? And that has to include not just the $2 per unit cost, the $3 or $5 it costs you in shipping to get it to the US. Your cost isn't $3, it's $8 or $10, okay? You want to know that gross profit and preferably per channel to know if you're more profitable on Amazon after the 15% marketplace fee and the 5 to 7%, FBA fees and any other overhead, that you're profitable for those products. The next is your net profit after your expenses in the US and overhead. And don't forget about your time. Don't just treat your US entity as the only costs are product and costs in the US. You need to factor in time and effort. So if you're spending half your time as the owner of that business and you have half your staff or virtual assistants, don't just burden your international business. You want to make sure you're pushing those management fees and overhead costs at your US business, whether it's a sub ledger and it's not a separate company, to understand, really how profitable it is. Even if you know that you might lose money or spend all of your profit on marketing, launching a product in the US, that is one tip, total aside, is that in general, the general advice that I'm hearing from the sellers I interact with and advise, that if you're launching a new product in the US on Amazon.com, because there are so many sellers, that you want to spend the profit of your product. You're selling it for $10 and there's $5 of profit at the end for about the first 4 to 6 weeks on pay-per-click ads, and then back that ad spend down to make some money. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the Amazon marketplace. Total aside. So you need to keep track of your cost of goods sold. That's the cost of the item itself and all the costs related to shipping that product to get to your gross profit. I'm not going to do too much. You want to track your inventory. What's at your 3PL, what's at Amazon FBA, what's been lost, what's been destroyed, what's been shipped. You need to know what's there. You might have a great selling product. You don't want to run out of product and then lose the buy box in your ranking. You want to keep an eye on your inventory turnover. How fast is it turning over? The other thing to keep in mind, and I haven't heard this anywhere, one of the things that you need to be aware of, and this is kind of a big tip, is that Amazon charges really high short-term and long-term storage fees. In most cases, I didn't hear this, you want to have a relationship with a 3PL. Unless you're shipping a small initial shipment over to FBA and you expect to sell out of it and then you'll try again later. But if you're sending a pallet or a container full, you probably want to send that to a 3PL in the US and have them ship 100 units or 1,000 units every week or every other week to Amazon. You never want to run out at Amazon, but you do not want to ship 10,000, 20,000 units. We have clients all the time that every 6 months, they're paying thousands of dollars to pull product out of Amazon FBA into a 3PL because it's going to save them tens of thousands of dollars in Amazon storage fees. So keep in mind, those are the things you want to look out for. You want to track your income and numbers by channel. If you're Amazon only, great. If you're Amazon and Shopify and eBay and Walmart and Amazon Canada, you want to make sure you're breaking those out and evaluating each of those channels individually. And you want to keep track of your profitability per SKU and per order. Do not expect to do that in your accounting system. Your accounting system is for financials and bank and financial information. Do not try to turn Xero or QBO into an ERP system. And I'll talk more about that. So I want to keep an eye on time. I've a lot to cover. I just want to cover the differences. There's a difference between real-time analytics and accounting, okay? You want to either look at the Amazon Seller Central reports or analytic tools like HelloProfit, Inventory Lab, Managed by Stats, Cash Cow Flow, Festure, and a bunch of others. And you want to upload your cost into it. And that's where you make real-time decisions about pricing changes and how much you should spend on marketing ads and decisions about listing and other things. And it will give you some level of profitability per SKU and profitability per order. There's a difference between analytics and real-time and daily decisions and accounting, which is a daily, weekly, monthly task until your books have been closed and every bank account reconciled and every credit card reconciled and all cost of goods sold posted, and you close that month of accounting. You don't know what the true net profitability is, okay? Those analytics tools are an estimate to make real-time decisions where you really want to look at accounting done properly in either Xero or QBO to really understand what's going on in your business. All right, some e-commerce accounting basics. And I only can cover basics in this short amount of time. I want to be respectful and not use too much time. We do have a whole accounting for, we have a ton of information on our YouTube channel that's free and guidance, and we'll cover stuff in more detail. And for my co-founder, partner, and wife, Patty, who doesn't talk quite as fast as I do. And we've got that, as well as we have Catching Clouds Academy. We have online training that you can take advantage of too if you want to dig into these details to do it yourself. And it applies to both US accounting and UK accounting, except for any UK or EU tax related components. But the whole point of accounting isn't to do taxes once a year at the end. It's to make decisions based on accurate financials. If you're magically teleported onto the Shark Tank, can you answer those questions? You know, your conversion numbers, what are your profitability? What's your gross profitability or net profitability? Do you know those numbers? Okay. And then you have to manage cash flow effectively. How much cash do you have to pay yourself? How much do you have to buy inventory? How much are you spending on marketing? You have to be tracked that. You want accurate financials so that you can secure funding. You can go and borrow funds from whether Amazon Loan or Shopify or any of the other partners. You want to make sure you stop and look at your financials monthly. Step aside from listing products and doing everything else and look and take a step and understand what's going on in your business, okay? If you don't know how to read financials, I suggest you go to it. We've got a YouTube video talking about a couple books you can read to do that. You need to be able to share your financials with your partners, investors, and your spouses. For those of us like me, I'm a husband-wife team, or those of us you're saying, hey, honey, on the weekends, or I'm going to take our kids' college fund and I'm going to go invest this in the UK business because it's going to buy us a vacation home on the Canary Islands. You need to be able to, safely, you need to trust those financials and make great decisions and be able to share them with other people. You want to use it for quarterly planning, and then you need it for your annual tax returns. All right. So here's kind of a general picture. The idea is that you want to understand that you need to be able to pull, and there's a crazy amount of information coming out of Amazon or Shopify or BigCommerce or eBay or whatever else. And that needs to be turned into useful financial information. I will tell you, if you're an Amazon seller, well, I've looked at probably 400 sellers' books that we've analyzed, and we've seen every possible way of recording income for Amazon in either Xero or QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop or Enterprise. And the only way that we know is reliable and easy and accurate to the penny for the last 4 years is using a tool called A2X Accounting. It'll post a summary invoice for any Amazon, Amazon CO UK, all the Amazons in Europe, Canada, US, Australia, into Xero or QuickBooks as a single invoice twice a year, and it's accurate to the penny. And it breaks out all the Amazon fees, including that's where you're going to see the sales tax that you collect broken out, because it doesn't show up on the Amazon Seller Central Payments page, okay? You want to do sales tax, you'll set up a tool like TaxJar. I will say the only way, and we use tools ourselves and been partners and friends with TaxJar for many, many years, that the only way to do it is by using an automated tool like TaxJar, okay? So even if you're hiring another accountant or professional, if they say they're going to do it manually on paper, don't trust them. Make sure they're using TaxJar. They can oversee TaxJar, but it's go there. The other thing you need is a cloud inventory tool. You can wait. These are ones that you don't necessarily need a cloud inventory tool. There are some lower end ones that I'll talk about on a later page. And there are also great tools like Forecastly is a great tool if you're an Amazon only seller to really monitor and manage what's going on inside of Amazon. All right, lots of stuff. I threw a lot of slides, even though I cut my slide deck way down. So you should be asking, now what? If you've got accurate books and you trust them, now what? You want to review your expenses and understand how much are you spending on inbound shipping or customs, and how can you reduce that spend? Is the business profitable, and why? You want to make sure you analyze your SKUs. You might have a couple high margin products, but you might have a mid-range margin product that has a significantly higher velocity, that has half the margin of your high margin product, but it sells 10 times as much, okay? And then you might have really a low margin product, or a product that's just not selling. You got to decide what you want to do with that and make sure and you don't push a lot of effort into selling that product. How much cash do you have, for how long, and what are your priorities on spending any of that available cash, okay? And then what are your most profitable channels? What's the least and most profitable products? You want to be able to stop and ask those questions and really challenge yourself as to what's going on, because you can get so caught up in shipping and buying and designing and manufacturing and marketing and returns and customer feedback. Make sure you put on your calendar to stop every month to do this. All right. Now, selecting the right tools to support your e-commerce business. There are a world of tools. Hopefully I will help you curate those. There are quite a few tools that only work for the US Amazon.com marketplace, and a lot of these tools are Amazon only, compared to like a cloud inventory or some of the other tools that'll work across multiple channels. All right, so business tools. You need a number of core back-end business tools, okay? If you're talking about cloud accounting, if you're an e-commerce business and you're online, and I don't care where you are in the world, you should not be running desktop software. Your business is in the cloud, the tools are in the cloud, the information's in the cloud. You should be running a cloud accounting application. And that can be either Xero or QuickBooks Online. We use Xero, and we've been great partners with them for the last 7 years now. 6 years, 7 years since they came to the US, and we're very happy with them. We do have a blog on our site comparing them. They're pretty much on par. So if you're on QuickBooks and you're happy with it and it's supporting your business, QuickBooks Online, then you don't need to change. If you are unhappy with QuickBooks or don't have anything, and this applies worldwide, and you would need a separate Xero file if you have a UK limited company or European business, and then a separate US entity. You'll have a Xero file for each one. You can't combine them unless you're just a single entity, a foreign seller or foreign entity selling into the US. Then all of that flows into a single business entity. A2X Accounting, take a look at them. They're great. We have links on our site. If you are going to end up hiring actual employees, not contractors or virtual assistants here in the US, Gusto is the right way it'll save you a ton of trouble. The other thing is that you have a ton of documents, from bank statements to bills and a range of other things. We recommend HubDoc. I didn't throw the icon here. Another UK company out there is HubDoc's out of Canada, is a tool called Receipt Bank. So you want something that lets you manage and process those documents to get a handle on all this information versus spending a ton of time logging into sites and downloading information from banks and others. Now, international payments. These are huge. I've talked about it. Another key company is Veeam. Veeam is a replacement to international wires. And they are blockchain based. They're modern. They follow all the official international banking rules. They're not in every country, but most countries, all the major ones. And they're great. So just like you want to track a shipment through FedEx, you can actually log on without having to go to a bank. You won't pay a banking fee, and you'll be able to transfer funds, either US dollars or or conversion, and whatever you need to do. If you have Chinese suppliers that expect everything paid in US dollars, you can use Veeam to do that. So it's a great solution. I highly recommend you check them out. We have links on our site as well if you want that under all of our partners page. Then you've got World First and Payoneer, which I mentioned before. This is one of those tools. Every US partner expanding internationally, in every international business, you need to be running World First, Payoneer, or OFX, and one of these tools to be managing the currency conversion. There are some lower personalized ones. People might use PayPal. It's just not as efficient, and they don't link to Amazon to be able to partner with Amazon and get your funds out of Amazon for your your every other week settlement statements. It's really the only way to go. All right. So cloud inventory, and I don't have Forecastly on here. As you grow, you need to be able to, and if you're storing information, any inventory at a 3PL, you need to do this. The point is, you need to be creating a purchase order for every time you're buying product, even if you're buying it from your international entity. You need to receive that product and know that if it's at a 3PL, it's on a boat, it's on a plane, it's at FBA. You need to track every order. If you're on multiple channels, it'll allow you to do multi-channel fulfillment, that you can have all of your Shopify orders go to a 3PL or FBA. You need that operational framework. It provides the structure. And then you just pick the tool dependent on it. I do whole other webinars on this, and I can talk for hours on cloud inventory, but this is a major tool you're going to need at some point in time, either day one or within the first 6 months, no matter what, to really effectively run your business. And I'm going to be wrapping up and definitely want to hit questions. I'll flip over to questions. So we're Catching Clouds. We do outsourced accounting. So if you're looking for someone and you're a larger over 50K per month in the US, or a larger brand establishing yourself, you can reach out to us for our accounting services and check us out. We have a ton of information. We have a webinar later today. And then we have Catching Clouds Academy that I mentioned. So if you want to check out our YouTube channel or our Twitter feed, we have online training for accounting for Shopify, accounting for Amazon, and a ton of additional supporting information. And I'm happy to get questions that both in this webinar and after the fact to answer that. And hopefully this has helped. So let me do Q&A. Let me go pop over and see what questions we have.
Hi, Scott. That was amazing, by the way. Really informative. Thank you for that. I actually have a few questions myself, if posed in the room yet. Kind of the registration side, do clients actually need to have everything completed, the registration, sales tax licenses, and other items before making a sale in the US, or can they just kind of test the water before making an investment in compliance?
You actually don't. There are some localities, but since you're not physically there, you actually do not have to have an EIN or a bank account or sales tax licenses to sell in the US. So it's kind of a lagging nexus, lagging requirement. So and that kind of different approach from the EU and regulation kind of where you'd have to be registered or you get in trouble before you make one sale. The US is a little more forgiving in the fact that there are requirements, but you have days, weeks, months, or quarters depending on it. So you could dip in, sell for a few quarters and go, oh, that didn't work, or picked a bad product, and back out for a year and then try it again later and not have paid for this additional compliance or the paperwork. And then it's actually in a lot of cases harder to close down those accounts than it is to open them up in the first place. So you want to be aware of it. It wants to be a priority in the first or second quarter. If you are truly a large business, you should do it all up front. You should hire a CPA and a lawyer in the US. You should have them create a corporation or identify everything you need to do. Because if you're going to ship $50,000, $100,000, $1 million worth of product in the US within a short time frame, then yes, you should take 2 or 3 months. But for smaller sellers, you're testing it out, you can do that in the first 3 to 6 months.
Okay, great. On the tool section of your presentation, can you not just kind of use your Amazon Seller Central to manage your Amazon sales?
You can. So you should be very familiar with Seller Central. Amazon is starting to invest in all of that. The challenge with most of the tools on Amazon is you have to go to a report, download it, pull it into Excel, and pivot it. And a bunch of us that have been accountants or techies, or you love playing with numbers, that can be fun, but it's not the best use of your time. Where these tools like HelloProfit and others, all you do is log in, upload your costs are accurate, and then you start analyzing. So you don't spend any time organizing and collecting the data, because you could spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours, and then your kids get home from school, and then you got to make dinner, and then you've got to do something else, and then you've got to ship product, and then they're like, oh, I didn't do any analysis. I spent all my time pulling the spreadsheets together, and I didn't make any decisions, okay? So I would suggest even the smallest seller should be spending $100 to $200 a month on these tools, because it'll magnify what they're doing.
Okay, great. And kind of going back to kind of tools that you've recommended, as we know that a lot of the sellers will be multiple currency. Does Xero and QuickBooks Online handle multiple currencies?
They both do. I'd have to say that Xero does it better. They've been multi-currency at the core for the last 10 years that they've been around. You have to jump through some extra hoops on QBO to do multi-currency, but it can be done. Just plan on extra work, but they can both handle that. And really, Xero is truly an international app. QuickBooks has some other limitations around that, but those are the things you want to look at, because you can have, and you want to have the same accounting in multiple countries, and then you can use tools like Fathom or Spotlight to create consolidated financials. So if you have a US entity and a UK entity, for example, you can have consolidated financials that'll show you your business, and it'll show it, say, here's the total of both of my entities, or my Canadian entity as well. And then you can look at it in British pounds or euros or US dollars, versus always having to kind of look at it and try to add them together and use spreadsheets to combine your investments.
Great. Okay. Final question from me. So should a client do the accounting and sales tax compliance themselves, or do you recommend outsourcing it to an expert in the US?
So that's an interesting question. So I would have to say that for any small business or business owner, you need to do every job in your business, from listing to shipping to packing to the accounting. But you want to do it if you know you're going to outsource it. You have no attention to detail for accounting. you really should plan on outsourcing those things. So you can absolutely leverage tools like TaxJar, which take the biggest burden of all of that. But if you know you have 20 other things that you need to do, or you have a full-time job still, or whatever else, then I would highly recommend some of the key things. You're outsourcing your fulfillment to Amazon FBA or a 3PL, outsourcing your accounting and sales tax. If you truly want your US efforts to really succeed and you can focus on key things like product and marketing, that you really should consider outsourcing it as early on as possible.
Brilliant, thank you. Does anybody else have any more questions for Scott? No? Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Scott. That was amazing. I will make sure that all presentations go out to everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the session today and thank our presenters as well. So thank you to Angela and Marley at Shapiro, Jennifer at TaxJar, and then Scott then at Catching Clouds. Thank you all. It's been brilliant. If you have any questions, please do let us know. We'll be sending out the video for the webinar on all of our socials, so please keep an eye out on that, and we'll reach out to you guys soon. Okay, thanks very much. Take care, everybody. Bye.